Let's now have a look at the family budget spreadsheet and have an assessment of what life might be like for a couple living in a coastal area of the United States. Coastal areas are more expensive to live than the Midwest, where I have a home. Let's assume that we're now 2035, which is 10 years from now, and we have one person who received their MBA, and so they're making about $150,000 per year at the age of 30, and that's about right in terms of the salary that we might expect 10 years from now for an MBA. Here we see their partner is making $83,000 per year. The tax table down here automatically calculates their taxes at 24%, and that has to do, of course, with their donation or their contributions to their tax deferred accounts. We'll come back to that in a moment. Let's say that they decide to live in a nice place at 6,500 a month per rent. And in Los Angeles, that might be a place like Hermosa Beach, in other words, one of the beach communities. But we want to get an assessment of how much is that in today's dollars. It's kind of hard to relate to that by thinking about it 10 years from now. So we're going to go to the investing formula spreadsheet. We're going to enter 6,500 in Formula One, 2% to grow that because of inflation, but we're going to go backwards in time 10 years to today, and that would be about $5,300 per month in rent today. In those beach communities of Los Angeles, that would be an okay apartment, two-bedroom apartment, maybe two bathrooms, a few blocks from the beach. It's an okay place. It's nothing fancy, but it is on the beach. And then we now want to have a look at the familiar bills, loans, and spending cash. We'll go down here to the tab named Table 6.1. Now what we're going to do is take the same table we used for the single person, but now use it for two people. That means we got to multiply these values from 2025, multiply them by two, and increase them for inflation for 10 years. And that's what happens here. Here's the single person value today. Here's two people 10 years in the future, and we're just going to round them up over here. So this is probably going to be okay for assessing their utilities. We can do the same thing over here for their spending cash. We'll probably find that they really need to start decreasing some of these costs over there. We're going to assume that this couple still continues on with student loans and car loans like they had when they were single. So each one of them has a $40,000 loan and each one of them has a $20,000 loan. And we're going to add all those four payments together into this one monthly payment located there. So let's go back to the budget. We see those all come through there. We're not going to add children into this just yet. We're going to come over here and we're going to see, okay, how much money is left over? We see these two columns here. This is how much is totally annually invested. This is how much will be in their tax deferred accounts. And this is what's left over to put in their taxable accounts. And we see that after about 10, 11 years, they might have $800,000 invested. Actually, we can increase this here to when they got together, they may have gotten together each with $50,000 a piece for each of them. And so they brought $100,000 into the relationship. And now we see they're close to $963,000 in through there in terms of their total investments after, say, 11 years. That probably really encourages them to start thinking about let's buy a house or let's have children. So their first thought might be, well, let's go ahead and have kids. So all we're going to do is take this we'll keep an eye on this 963 number and add one child to the mix and see how does that number change. So we're going to take one here, one kid, 963 goes down to 750,000, which is a change of about $215,000. If we change this now to back to zero, we see 963, and now we're going to go to two kids, and we see that goes down to 536, and that's probably what, around $430,000. I had to double check my calculator. So yes, here we have $536,000 invested with two children. If we go back to no kids, it's $963,000, and that's a difference of roughly $430,000 or $215,000 per child. So that's only over this one decade that the kids are costing. So it's not just the direct costs, as we see through here, we can add up all those direct costs and see it's about $195,000, but it's also the lost investment, which grew to 215,000 at a rather modest 5% growth. So that was a loss of an additional $20,000. Of course, it's absolutely wonderful to have children. This is not a commentary on whether you should or shouldn't have children. That's entirely up to you. It's whether you understand what the costs are and are you prepared to handle the costs of childcare. Now let's go back and reset this to zero and get back to our 963 value here. This couple sees a lot of leftover monies in these two columns and begins to, well, leftover is a strong word, monies that they might, instead of investing into equity funds, they might instead decide to invest these monies into a house. Let's see what kind of house we can actually put them in. So we're going to zero out the rent. And then we're going to go down to this table 6.1 times 2, and we're going to put them in a house. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick here. We're going to put an equal sign there, and let's say $1 million house, and we're going to times that by 80% because that's how much the loan is going to be for. So now we get an $800,000 a loan, and we're going to say that's yeah, is that a jumbo loan or not? It's probably going to be pretty close in the future, but maybe they can get this loan in the future. Let's say they can get it for 7%. We're going to want to make certain we assess their monthly costs. They've got to make certain that they can still pay their taxes on this $1 million house. And so if we take a second to think about how much money they need for the payments for property taxes, for maintenance, let's take a second to think about that. So on $1 million house, their property taxes are going to be around ten to $12,000 in California, pretty much higher in other states, but in California, a little lower property tax rate. But we're going to need a little extra money to care for the maintenance and additional costs. Maybe they need a paint or a roof on the house, etc. 2.5%, this number here multiplied by 12 gives them $20,000. So an extra, say, $7, 8, $9,000 per year to pay for maintenance on the house. So that seems kind of okay overall for this first assessment. Now we'll go back to our budget and see, okay, there's their monthly loans have really increased in terms of all their payments, and they're we got to zero out they're not gonna have this $100,000 available to them. In fact, they got to find another $100,000 to take care of that down 20% down payment, which was $200,000 on the $1 million house. And so now we see that their investments have grown to 823,000, and they were before, when they were renting, they were at 963,000, so a decrease of 140,000, which of course is being made up by the investment into their house. We haven't added back in the equity that they have in their house. And so they probably actually are probably a little ahead of the 963. In other words, this is still a good investment for them to be making. However, how much is that house actually in today's dollars? So this was $1 million house on the coast. Let's go ahead and figure out, well, how much is that in today's dollars? So that's 10 years from now. So we're going to go here to Formula One, enter $1 million in through there. And then we're going to make this 4.5%, which is the growth of the house, not 2% for inflation, but houses are growing average at 4.5%. We see that's a $650,000, $645,000 house today. This couple would have to leave the entire Los Angeles basin. There really are very few houses available in the places they'd want to live at $645,000 in today's money. In fact, I don't really know what they'd be able to buy for that in today's money. So we probably got to increase the cost of the house that they're buying here. And we can maybe change this to 1.2 million, and hopefully then this 24,000 will still cover some of those costs. Now we go back here and we see they're decreasing now their investments, but they can still go higher. They can still buy a more expensive house because they still have positive values over here in column L and column M. In other words, we're just increasing one value at a time to see how expensive a house can these folks get into. So now we'll put them at $1.3 million house. Okay, now we've run into a couple of negatives. That means they would have to go over here to some of these costs and decrease those on the spending cash. So we've kind of come toward the limit, and we're looking at a $1.3 million house in the future. Well, how much is that in today's dollars? So we're going to go here, change this to 1.3 million, and we're going to find, okay, that's an $840,000 house today. There are houses far away from the beach cities in Los Angeles area and locations like Thousand Oaks where they might be able to buy a house for that kind of money, but it's nothing fancy. This will be a very much a starter house for them. So this is how we go about looking at these budgets, just trying to get an assessment of what they can and cannot do with these monies. Again, these are not predictions of the future. As we all know from even my own salary, there's a lot of complications in our salary histories. They don't increase monotonically like this, nor do these other costs. Rather, these are just tools for us to get an understanding of what is potentially available to us and what is not available to us. And you get there by changing one or two parameters at a time. I hope this has been useful for you.